My guest is Costas Christ, a very much recognized expert in the area of sustainable tourism, responsible tourism for last nearly 2 decades. He is the chairman for the World Travel and Tourism Council, WTTC.
Well, I think what's interesting about sustainable tourism is we're reaching kind of a tipping point. We're finally, after 2 decades of work, we're seeing this whole notion of how tourism can be a catalyst for protecting cultural and natural heritage in our planet and deliver tangible economic benefits both to the business side and to local communities become something that's not such a foreign concept anymore. The challenge in the United States is at the governmental level. When we have approached the U.S. federal government to take positions of policy the way European countries have to support sustainable tourism as a national agenda item, the federal government kicks it back to the states and says this is not a U.S. government issue, this is an individual state issue. That whole notion of the 60s and the baby boomer generation, the Marrakesh Express and to Nepal and so on was kind of the origins of the current adventure travel movement. What we are seeing is a demographic shift. The population of the U.S. has been more behind these ideas than I said at the federal government level, but we're seeing that gap I would say close as these issues percolate up more and more. We're seeing larger industry players in North America take positions on sustainable tourism. Aspen, for example, with 1.3 million visitors a year, is now a best practice model on how a major resort can operate in a sustainable fashion. So I wouldn't necessarily say that the U.S. lags far behind Europe when it comes to travelers' interest in traveling environmentally responsible. I would say at the policy level we do. We have seen a lot of success over the last 20 years, but most of that success has been in what I would call the mom and pop operations of the world. In other words, individual lodges and small companies that have benchmarked outstanding best practices. We're now trying to take that notion of sustainability and move it into a much higher level of the industry, from golf resorts to cruise ships to city-based hotels. I never thought in 15 years I would begin to see major companies like Fairmont Hotels and Resorts, with 44 properties in 10 countries, including Europe, make green a major initiative within their corporation. In the case of Starwood, Starwood 5 years ago, 6 years ago, these weren't big issues. Today, Starwood's building a property in downtown Vancouver that they promise is going to be LEED Silver or Gold certified. That's encouraging.
Many of the people in our audience may not be familiar with what is LEED when you were referring to the hotel certification.
Right. Yeah, LEED is basically a standard for energy and environmental efficiency in the architectural structure of a building. In other words, how that building itself exists in terms of energy efficiency and green technology. It's great. Let's have those buildings, address fundamental energy efficiency and so on. This is a critical issue. Climate change and a whole host of other things. But of course it goes beyond that. It goes into supply chains of where you're buying your products, how those products are being grown. Are you supporting local farmers? All of these issues feed into this whole notion of sustainability.
And as I've heard you say before, the whole concept behind sustainable tourism has to be based on sound, sustainable economic models.
It does, because over the last 20 years, even the most well-meaning projects, we've seen a lot of initiatives born out of a heartfelt sense of sustainable tourism. In other words, businesses that were based on a model of sustainable tourism, they just didn't have a good model for their market to go along with it. And despite how well-meaning they were, a lot of those businesses failed. And what we realize today is that the wheels of sustainability and the wheels in terms of transforming global travel and tourism into a catalyst for protecting cultural and natural heritage is based on a solid business model. The wheels of sustainability turn on the wheels of economic progress in that sense. What I mean is that if the business isn't viable, then no matter how much you want to do sustainability, it's not going to work.